Hi everyone, and welcome to the Venture Playbook Podcast by SIA. This is the podcast where we dive deep into the world of venture building, innovation and growth, speaking with leaders who are pushing the boundaries in their respective industries. I'm your host today, Emily Orlik. I'm an innovation manager here at SIA, and today I have the privilege of speaking with a fantastic guest, Lauren Pilgreen. Lauren is Head of Startup Innovation at Sustainable Ventures, where she works with some of the most exciting and disruptive climate tech startups in the UK. Lauren, welcome to the podcast. We're thrilled to have you here today.
Oh, thanks so much, Emily. I'm really happy to be here. I'm really looking forward to it.
I know our listeners will be very eager to hear from you. So to start us off and to lay a bit of context, I suppose, can you just give us a little glimpse into your world as Head of Startup Innovation at Sustainable Ventures? What might a typical day entail for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And probably worth giving a little background here on Sustainable Ventures as an institution itself. So for those of you who don't know us, Sustainable Ventures is the leading growth partner for climate technology startups. We support entrepreneurs from idea to exit. And as the UK's home of climate technology, we're helping companies to scale through access to funding, workspaces, expert business services, and a thriving community of peers and partners. To date, we've supported more than 850 UK climate technologies across a myriad of support avenues. And we, amongst our community, see a sort of survival rate of about 85%. This is compared against industry averages of about 40%. So in other words, the companies that we have in our system are surviving more so than the average just because of the way that companies can interact with the different support streams and with each other. And as a business, we had closed our own £3 million raise toward the back end of 2023. Now, we've been in business for the past 14 years, but this was to kick off our regional expansion. So whilst you'll see us in London County Hall, you're now going to see us in Manchester, in the centre of town, which is super exciting. And we also are looking to set up another physical location in Glasgow, which we are absolutely thrilled about, given the state of climate technology there. Snapshot as a business, we have supported over 7,000 highly skilled green jobs and have contributed to about 1.2 billion in funding through the businesses that we support. So we find that this ecosystem model really is a sort of make or break for businesses as they are growing and as they are navigating the pitfalls of the valley and death. And as a business, so climate technology, interestingly, over the years has taken many forms. And we started supporting built environment and future energy. We then expanded the breadth of that to include mobility, agri-tech and food, circular economy. And now what we're seeing is actually more of a focus on the technology sets. So less so on the sector of vertical and more so on different types of dual hardware, software, deep tech, etc. Now, Emily, to your initial point, my job here, I wear many hats, but in a nutshell, my job is to help companies win money through innovation funding streams. And so my job is split into sort of three major prongs. So one of which I'm looking after all of our innovation services here. So those are quite literally R&D tax credits, grant writing, innovation loan application support, and we have a small design/venture development team in-house. I support my companies with all kinds of innovation project planning, consortia building, and sort of matching to those funding streams. And I also look after ecosystem growth for the business. So on any day, I could be meeting with 10 different companies. I could be meeting a whole new bunch of companies at pitches, university demo days, trade shows. So I'm Emily, I'm constantly running around, I would say, trying to find and help companies. And at the moment right now, we're sort of reacting to a punchy funding landscape, one would say. And so really it's my express sort of job and interest to stay on top of all of the funding streams, how we can ensure that these companies get what they need. If we need to move towards more sort of collaborative R&D, if whatever the sort of mechanism is, we've got to ensure that we are at the forefront of how funding is being distributed to climate technologies here in the UK.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lauren, for that overview. So you really are at the forefront of climate technologies here. You're the home of client tech. You're expanding across the UK. You're covering all these verticals: built environment, agri-tech, food, circular economy, but actually now more so applying kind of a disruptive tech lens to that.
Yes.
And you're supporting these climate tech startups right from idea through to exit. So you're in a very privileged position, I would say. You're really at the forefront here.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to hear from you. Where are you seeing the most disruptive innovation right now?
Yeah, it's super interesting, Emily, and I love that actually. We are absolutely privileged to be witnessing these companies at different stages of development and what the mechanisms are that keep them afloat. And as a result, what are the new types of companies that are entering the market versus the companies that are actually able to survive the sort of kicks in the teeth of business and changing market landscapes. But, it's an interesting thing, disruption. We are seeing now that it's really less about verticals and industries. It's really more about this technology that is being able to be applied to sustainable market applications. But to answer your question, I like to split this into two sort of easily accessible ideas, and one of which is the new to world applications and innovations, and the other of which is the mature and scaling. And essentially, companies will be able to navigate accordingly. So, let me give you a little bit of color. On the new to world stuff, we are seeing a ton of deep technology intersecting climate use cases. So essentially, we're seeing bioengineered sequins for large-scale circular economy. That's a company called Radiant Matter. We're seeing mycelium tech that's converting industrial waste into building insulations. That's a company called Mycor. One of our newer investments is a green chemicals company that's using AI-based cyanobacteria as a platform. They're called Deep Blue Biotech. So what's interesting, these are some of the portfolio companies on the investment side of our business. And what we're starting to see is quite clearly a shift away from a single use case or a single sort of tech for one particular thing. And we're seeing that actually it's innovation across the tech, but it's also innovation across the market, and it also then splits into a series of market applications. So we could take the bioengineered sequence case, for example, and whilst that starts within the fashion industry, that has major implications for the printing industry as well. So we can start to see the knock-on effects, and actually what we're looking at here is technology that can cut across markets, and that's not surprising given how difficult it is to raise money in general, not just now, of course now is a particularly difficult time, but the fact that it's a really hard job, and, investors want to see companies that are going to be the unicorns. So this novel technology that's got multiple applications is really what's getting in on the investment front, on the early stage investment front, I would say, from our perspective. And if we flip over to the second point, which is more around, dare we say, more mature technologies, not necessarily that the technologies themselves are mature, but the sectors in which they play in or the solutions that they solve are a little bit more mature. We're seeing a lot more collaborative R&D, industrial research, kind of government funding that is more applicable to them. And that kind of makes sense if you think about it, because government is wanting to reward companies that are closer to market, if you will, so that they're making the biggest return on investment and that they're able to show the greatest uplift in GDP for innovation funding. So we're definitely seeing these industrial demonstrators coming about. And to give you a little bit of flavor for that, one that the team is working on that I am finally allowed to talk about. I am so pleased because we actually won it in August last year, and they've been working all the while, but we finally had a press release go out in the Guardian, so now we're finally able to talk about it. But it's a funding stream under Innovate UK called Bridge AI, and we put together a piece of work that was basically looking at integrating surplus food into supply chains for FMCG, and it was the first ever case in which we're able to plug the golden triangle, which is what it's called sometimes, which is basically supply, demand, and transport. And this project that we've been working on with eight partners, really a massive team effort here, is basically using innovative AI and machine-enabled tracking and logistics platforms to essentially design out food waste, eliminating waste ingredients and products from the supply chain altogether. And this pilot scheme, which is about 16 months all in, is projected to save up to 700 tons of quality and surplus food. Mind you, this is the equivalent of up to 1.5 million meals, and prevent something like 1,400 tons of CO2 from being emitted. So it's really a super, super exciting thing. And this kind of stuff is, usually match funded. So there will be a series of parties that come to the table, depending on the size of business. They will put a grant application forward. The grant will fund some of it, but they themselves have to match fund the rest. So it's essentially a joint fundraising and grant activity in one, which makes it a little bit tough and a little bit of fun if those of us in the world who are hustlers. It's certainly a lot of fun to have to corral 20 people in 6 to 8 weeks on something that is arguably a sort of groundbreaking piece of work. And in this project, it was about 2.8 mil total, but it was about a 2 mil grant project. So, a little bit of color there, but companies. So two of our startups in there. One is Bristol Superlight, which is an EV platform, a machine learning enabled EV platform, super lightweight, saves 73% in OpEx. And the other is Zest, formerly the Wonky Collective. They are an AI platform for eliminating surplus food in the supply chain, and they're the lead on this call. And these two companies are really seeing the benefit of what is essentially 700 to 800K in government funding, and then they're able to go to investors and match fund the rest. So really, really exciting times, Emily. But I think there's a distinction between the new to world stuff, so early stage pipeline, and the stuff that's entering a saturated or a competitive landscape, if you will.
Brilliant. And I did see that article in The Guardian the other day, and just thought it was a fantastic example of applying AI to tackle food waste, and also the importance of collaboration. I think you mentioned there were 7 to 8 partners on the project.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have Nestle in there. We've got Howard Tenants Logistics, Google Cloud, FairShare, one of the UK's most reputable food distribution charities, and we've got the two startups, Zest and Bristol Superlight. Of course, ourselves, we are involved. Sustainable Ventures is involved, and we've also got an emission sort of impact monitoring and measurement partner, Future Plus, who's one of our partners here in the space. But yeah, massive corralling and team effort and trust in one another from a collaboration standpoint.
Well, congratulations on everything you've achieved so far. I think that's brilliant, and we will certainly be watching with a close eye to hear more about the outcomes of that project. I loved that as an example. I also loved that example of the next generation of sequence. You mentioned the startup working in that area. You also mentioned a startup, I think it was called Deep Blue Biotech, that was using AI. And I want to dive into this topic a little bit more, because this is coming up in, every other conversation at the moment, AI. Are you seeing a lot of climate innovations that are using AI to tackle some of these really stubborn net zero challenges?
Short answer here is yes. And I think the whole industry, the whole sort of startup landscape, regardless of climate, is moving in this direction. But yes, absolutely, we are seeing the climate technologies use this. And as you might imagine, it's quite a hot sort of controversial topic in the climate world because of just simply the emissions and what's associated with AI. But personally, as a business, we are in the very early stages of developing sort of life cycle assessment and sort of looking into this in major depth. But from an early side, what I can tell you is that we're starting to see how AI can really address the opportunity gap for hardware startups. So we're starting to see the implications, the positive implications of how it can help reduce R&D cycles. And we're thinking that the data will show that it will reduce the amount of money, the amount of time that it takes to get to market. It's essentially all about these companies being able to use the tools at their disposal to overcome that valley of death and basically get in the market, which will be huge for climate technologies. And yes, say Deep Blue Biotech has an AI platform. Several other of our companies, whether they're in the portfolio of investment or whether they're in just the general ecosystem, have been using this dual hardware software approach, and they are using AI. And this is something we can't shy away from. As a sort of universe, as a world, this is something that will be more and more important for us. Of course, there's always the basic things around automating tasks and getting entrepreneurs to focus their efforts on really what matters and what are entrepreneurs great at. Entrepreneurs are great at finding a problem and matching it to a real solution, and then going out there and knocking on doors and making sure that validation happens and that it's real and that people have real pain and they want to pay for it. So, the presence of AI and on some sort of low level tasks means that we can almost give our entrepreneurs the freedom to do more and more of what they're good at and get better and better at it. So there's also sort of an impact on talent development that comes from getting rid of some of the tasks that just otherwise bog down somebody's day. But yes, absolutely, we're seeing a load of this in the space, and we have different investors in our network, whether they're we do pre-seed and seed at the moment. And so we've got companies that will do seed or Series A. So the next iteration, we know some private equity companies, which are much later down the line. But a lot of the later stage investment is starting to tell us that life cycle assessments, AI enabled, very stringent data frameworks are increasingly important, just given how regulations are going and basically how they need to show their investors the data and sort of the impact and the potential of the impact at scale, and having credibility around this is super, super important. And one last kind of point on this, we have recently announced a partnership with Google Cloud, and actually Google Cloud were one of the partners under the Bridge AI scheme that I talked about a little bit earlier. And they're helping on us face value. They're helping our companies with tech support and cloud credits, which is just amazing. But on their own side of AI, they recognize, of course, the potential upsides and the potential emissions associated with this, and they are tirelessly working at launching their own sustainable AI as well. And so they've been looking at AI accelerators that would increase the sort of a 3-time improvement on carbon efficiency for AI workloads, and they've been running this over a couple of years, so they're starting to see good traction there, and they've come up with their own metric even for measuring sustainability and transparency in AI. So I think as an industry, we're all moving towards it. Innovation and innovators must use this to get ahead of the curve and to focus on what they're good at. And of course, even to integrate it into their actual business to differentiate from others and attract investment. But we also need to be aware of the impact that it has. And so I think it's a complex topic, but we are seeing that everybody is leaning into it. And I think we're all actively working on what we need to do to make it worth everybody's while as we go.
So opportunities and challenges in equal measure, we could say. So at Sustainable Ventures, you support climate tech startups from the very, very early days through to scale. How do we take these disruptive innovations and make them commercially viable? Can you give us kind of a little bit of a flavor as to that journey?
Yeah, Emily, absolutely. And I bang on about this all the time because it's really I'm moving my hands, but you can't see me. It's really closing that gap between a company having a certain level of technology readiness and be trading in the market. And our job really is to just squash this as best as we can. So we are bringing in the potential commercial partners earlier and earlier. And sometimes this there's a couple of ways that this manifests. Sometimes it's bottom up, sometimes it's top down, but I'll give you a couple of examples to give you a little bit more flavor to that. So one of our portfolio companies, SunSwap, from one of our earlier accelerator cohorts, they are a zero emissions transport refrigeration company. Actually, we went to go do a site visit with them the other day. It's just so cool to see how they operate and where the R&D is taking place and where the production is taking place. Anyway, I'm a big old nerd. I love that. But so this company, just for a little bit of frame of reference for everybody, they were set up in 2020 and they've raised over 28 million pounds to date. And they've got a massive team in startup land. I think they're probably about 99, but don't quote me on that one. They may even be more than that now. But so on the commercial, overcoming commercial barriers side of things, they started a trial with Tesco, actually. And so this was a 2-week trial, which has resulted in a very strong commercial relationship for them. And, I was speaking to Ben, who's on their partnerships team, about this some time ago. And he was basically saying that there was a bit of skepticism on the other side, of course, as you'd expect a big retailer to take the risk of taking on an up-and-comer. It's a little bit hard for them because the structures are different. So they ran this 2-week trial, which was extraordinarily structured, benchmarked effectively, and it was to monitor performance quite literally. And so that actually resulted in a 70% savings in OpEx for them. So the commercial case is a no-brainer, but it's around this concrete data performance. They were working within their real-world roots. They were basically showing how the refrigeration unit maintained under different temperatures and temperature stability across multiple cycles. So they, extraordinarily data-centric on how the performance of this thing will improve Tesco's lives. And so they called it, Ben had called it a sort of progressive validation. Essentially, you start with simulated result. You start with the benchmark, you simulate results, you run a route, you run a trial, you make tweaks, you keep going. And, at the end of this is a real customer for them. And now they've done over 30 trials like this. So, from the company's perspective, it's biting your way into a corporate's, how do we want to say that? We basically want a corporate to see us. We want to demonstrate the value. We need to understand, full stop, that they are taking a huge risk when they are opening their doors to innovators. And so it's how the innovator can work alongside the corporate on some kind of trial or some kind of initiative, some kind of bite-sized opportunity that says, hey, and we'll show you the value. Full stop. And SunSwap is a great example of a company that's done this. From a sort of top-down perspective, Sustainable Ventures, we've been running innovation challenges, which are usually multi-stakeholder programs. I'm sure, Emily, you've come across these. And in fact, actually, in your time at SV, you might have come across an innovation challenge or two. But we run these programs which essentially match corporates with innovators, and they run trials, and they basically see, is there business to be done here? So it's a bit of a matchmaking exercise. Theses are set, problem statements are set, innovators come in, matchmaking, zhuzhing up, and so then each company is pitching to each corporate. Anyway, they meet each other, they get in a room, they decide whether they do business or not. And we've seen massive success with this over the years. I think in general, it's something like maybe 70% of our companies end up in commercial trials with the corporate that they've kind of matched with over the time. So this always works. This works super well. But this is a combo of corporates and government and innovators to get involved, and more of a bottom up one. Emily, I would say, is like we host this massive ecosystem here. And actually, sometimes companies just amongst themselves do business and find commercial routes, which is just amazing. So one example here is a company called Batchworks, which is a 3D printing company. And then Dame, who you may know, in fact, was maybe with us in the workspaces a couple of years ago, but they're a feminine hygiene product. And between the two of them, they collaborated and built a 3D printed tampon dispenser, which had quite a lot of press and had quite a lot of commercial interest around it. So, there are different mechanisms, but it's essentially getting people in a room, working out the problem statement, and really honing in on whether the solution actually fits the pain point.
It's a bit like climate tech speed dating, I think.
Totally.
It's exactly that. It's honestly, and people love speed dating. I mean, I don't know in real life, maybe less so, but in the business front, people love speed dating because it's quick. You get to the point.
True. And you say, Lauren, that the commercial case is a no-brainer. So I'm wondering, what would be your message to established businesses who want to accelerate their net zero activities?
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. We like to look at this, or like to encourage people to look at this as you would a sort of new product development pipeline in general. You're not wanting to reinvent the wheel. Some of the things you bring in from the net zero perspective are going to be things off the shelf that you can implement quickly, that will have some gains, that will be BAU. Some things will be a sort of mid-tier of that, which is stuff that can maybe increase revenue streams, stuff that has larger cost implications, and some of that will be totally radical or new to world. And like, not everything is going to be radical or new to world for a company, but also not everything is just going to be bite-sized, mature solutions on the market. So we always encourage people to take a portfolio approach to bringing in innovation, to bringing in net zero innovation, and to think of net zero innovation really more as resilience and performance, because regulation is always looming. It's always something that needs to get done. We have a huge responsibility as a global population, doesn't matter where we are, to do something about this. And businesses also have a responsibility to take care of their side of things, but also to attract talent as well, because talent wants net zero. So there are a lot of factors to think about here. But we always like people to just get really clear on what their goals are, what is absolutely essential, what is something that can be innovative, what is something that can cross over different objectives as well. And I always bring people back to the build, buy, partner model. What can you build? What can you buy? What can you bring in? And each of these elements has its own mechanism. So partnering, for example, would be going through innovation challenges and sort of doing these commercial trials, would be the sort of bridge AIs of the world, like getting involved in the collaborative R&D versus building. Okay, so you're seeing what's out there on the market, but you bring the skills in-house. Maybe then you're simply commissioning these people, these innovators, to do things that then you're understanding the skills and resources yourselves. And then, of course, we've one of our initiatives a couple of years ago was with Schneider Electric, which was building the first net zero home, and they ended up acquiring one of the companies that they worked with. I think maybe 4 companies out of 80, maybe 4 were selected for the collaborative piece, and then they ended up acquiring Zygo at the end of it. So recognizing where your fiscal opportunities are, yeah, I guess what I always sort of dial it back to companies, like at its core, where do you want to be? Do you want to be leading in this space? Do you want to be using this as an opportunity to unlock major commercial and operational gains, future-proof your business, attract better talent? Or do you want to be on the back foot of regulation and simply responding? And both of these stances are okay, but I think it's before companies engage in a whole, net zero overhaul. It's just a quick sense check of where we want to be. And it's the same kind of argument that we pose to our founders. It's a sense check of, do you want to exit or do you want to keep your business? Just quick, dial it back. What do you want? Do you want to lead? Do you want to follow? All is fine. But all of these things then will have different implications for how you engage with innovators across your business, especially in net zero.
Well, certainly some thought-provoking questions there to mull over. Lauren, we could go on chatting forever, and it's an absolute joy to listen to you speak. But before we end for the day, I wanted to just get in a final question and ask you, what are you most optimistic about when it comes to the next 5 to 10 years, say, of climate tech? What are you excited about?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm always super pleased about the UK's focus on innovation as a nation, because we know that they are constantly striving to have more innovation as a percentage of GDP. We will always, always, always be innovating, and it is just the question of in which areas. I think in climate in general, we are seeing a shift in this technological landscape, which is really exciting. It's scary for companies, of course, but it is very, very exciting. And if we are focusing on the best in class technologies as opposed to sector specific, actually we're developing the best business cases for the nation to benefit from, So I do think that a little bit of this gray area at the moment, whilst it's scary, is actually really, really exciting. And me personally, because I run the innovation services side of things, I'm always super keen when I see different forms of funding that crop up for earlier stage technologies. We're currently working with Innovate UK as an investor partner, and they do a future economy loan scheme, which is like the earliest stage of venture debt we've seen. So I just love that. So in other words, we're able to have different forms of funding earlier on, and it's just so important in an investing landscape that's a little bit difficult. But I have to say, I'm always super excited about programs and funds that focus on diverse founders and talent. We always want to see more collaborations. We always want to see more upskilling. But I do feel that the state of the industry is moving positively forward.
Brilliant. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for joining us today on the Venture Playbook podcast and for sharing all your fantastic insights and giving us such an intriguing glimpse into the world of climate tech startups. So thank you so much for that. If people want to follow you or follow Sustainable Ventures, what's the best way for them to do this?
Yeah, great, Emily. Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. It's always such a pleasure. So how they can follow us? Very low hanging fruit. If you go on LinkedIn, Sustainable Ventures, just give us a follow. You'll be able to see what we're up to. We post a lot of content. We have a great marketing team, always capturing what we're up to here. You're also personally welcome to DM me on LinkedIn, a direct message for those of us that maybe don't know the term GM, which you can find me through Sustainable Ventures. I'm always open to talk to founders. I'm always open to talk to potential partners. So really, any stakeholder that wants to do real work in this space, please get in touch with me directly, and we'll see how we can help.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Lauren. That's it for today's episode. So thank you to all our listeners too. If you enjoyed the conversation, please do follow, like, and share. We will be back very soon with another brilliant guest. So stay tuned. And once again, thank you to you, Lauren, for coming on to the podcast and for the fantastic conversation.